The new intern at my company had been asking me to drive her home every day. We lived in the same direction, so I let it slide. Until one weekend. It was long past midnight. I was fast asleep when my phone suddenly rang. I answered, still groggy. Her voice came through sharp and commanding, like she was used to being obeyed. "I'm at Core Lounge doing karaoke. Come here and take me home." I sat up, already annoyed. "It's 2 a.m. Don't you think it's a bit much to call me and expect me to pick you up? I'm not your driver." She let out a cold, dismissive laugh. "My cousin is the HR director. Driving me around is a privilege for you. Do what you're told, or I'll make sure you get fired." I paused. Not because I was intimidated, because it was almost ridiculous. She still didn't know who I was. Since I didn't say anything, Vanessa Cole made a faint sound of impatience. "What's wrong? Scared now?" she said. "Then hurry up, and bring me a hot milk on the way. I want it the second I get in the car." I listened as she kept piling on demands like it was completely normal. Honestly, I couldn't help but laugh. Vanessa had only been with the company for a month. The day I first saw her, I had just come back from checking the factory floor, still wearing my work clothes. I ran into her in the elevator right after her interview. She wrinkled her nose, looked me up and down, and subtly moved away from me. People at the company usually kept their distance when they saw me anyway, so I didn't think much of it. The next day after work, I was about to drive home when Vanessa walked straight up to my car. She opened the passenger door and sat down. Her tone was completely matter-of-fact. "You're one of the factory techs, right? I saw you heading toward Lakeview Residences yesterday. That's where I live. Drop me off on the way." I was momentarily stunned. I oversee more than a dozen companies, with tens of thousands of employees, and yet, this was the first time someone had spoken to me like that. I opened my mouth to respond, but she had already buckled her seatbelt and was urging me forward. "Let's go. I'm in a hurry." She took out her phone and started scrolling. She didn't even look at me again. She was new. I let it go. It was on my way anyway, so I drove. When we arrived at Lakeview, she didn't thank me. She didn't even glance back. She just slammed the door and walked off. I figured she had just graduated, still didn't understand how things worked, so I didn't think much more about it. I assumed that would be the end of it. It wasn't. From that day on, Vanessa showed up in my passenger seat after work like clockwork. She never asked, never waited, and before I even had the chance to say anything, the demands started. "From now on, stop by my building in the mornings. Pick me up on your way. I hate the smell of smoke. I know it's your car, but no more smoking in it. I came downstairs 3 minutes before you today. Be faster next time. Don't make me wait. These seats are too hard. Bring me a cushion tomorrow, something soft. I don't like the color of this car. When you get the chance, wrap it in pink." At first, I couldn't understand how someone could get daily rides and still act like she was doing me a favor. Then I figured it out. Her cousin, the HR director. "Hello? Why aren't you saying anything? Are you coming or not?" Her impatient voice came through the phone again. I yawned. "No, I'm going back to sleep. Call a cab," and I hung up. Before I could even put my phone down, it rang again. "Ethan, have you lost your mind? Did you seriously just hang up on me?" she snapped. "Do you realize my cousin is sitting right next to me?" I replied lazily. "Oh?" That only made her more irritated. "You really don't get it, do you? No wonder you're stuck doing manual work at the bottom of the company." She didn't stop. "Let me make it clear. I brought my cousin and his whole family out to karaoke tonight to thank him for getting me this job. If you had any sense, you'd come here right now, pay the bill at Encore, and then drive all of us home." She paused briefly. "Make a good impression on my cousin. Do a good job, and maybe he'll speak well of you. One word from him, and you could move from the factory straight into an office. Just like that." I paused for a moment, then asked, "You're sure your cousin can get me promoted with just one word?" Vanessa didn't hesitate for even a second. "Let me tell you something," she said. "Last month, a guy in marketing disrespected my cousin. Just once." Her tone carried a strange kind of pride. "My cousin had him transferred straight to the warehouse. The guy had been with the company for 6 years, and he didn't even dare say a word about it. He just left. That's how simple it is." I went quiet for a moment, because I remembered that case. A longtime employee, solid, reliable, had suddenly been reassigned to the warehouse. At the time, it didn't make sense. I had even asked about it. The explanation I got was that he had requested the transfer himself, said he wanted a change of pace. I assumed he was burned out, so I approved it. Now, it was clear what had really happened. I took a slow breath. "Your cousin really knows how to handle things. Vanessa completely missed the meaning behind my words. She sounded even more pleased with herself. "Now you're starting to get it," she said. "My cousin told me that in a few months he's bringing our entire family into the company, every single one of them." Her voice sharpened slightly. "Men, women, young, old, placed in every department. Once that happens, the whole company will answer to us." I smiled faintly. "Which HR director is that again?" I asked. Then I added, "Isn't your cousin worried the boss might find out?" Vanessa laughed, completely confident. "My cousin already thought about that. The owner of this company is the richest man in the city. He runs more than a dozen major corporations." She scoffed lightly. "You really think he has time to care about some small branch like this?" Then she said it plainly. "As long as the boss isn't around, my cousin is the one in charge. Period." I smiled again. She wasn't wrong about one thing. I did manage more than a dozen companies, but those operations had already stabilized years ago. This branch, on the other hand, had been underperforming for a long time. That's exactly why I had been coming here almost every day, checking the factory, looking at the numbers, trying to figure out where things were going wrong. Now I finally knew. The problem wasn't outside. It was inside. "Are you coming or not?" Vanessa snapped again. "Let me make this clear. Once my family gets into this company, every single one of them will outrank you." She didn't wait. "If you don't start sucking up to me now, you'll regret it later." I listened to her demands, and I couldn't help it. I laughed. "Funny," I said calmly. "I've never been the type to suck up to anyone." Then I added, "If your family has such strong connections, you can figure out your own way home." And I hung up. This time, she didn't call again. Instead, my phone filled with messages almost instantly. "You're just a factory worker and you dare talk back to me? Just wait. I'm not only going to get you fired, I'm going to make sure you get blacklisted from the entire industry." I stared at the messages for a moment. Honestly, I didn't even know how to react. I run more than a dozen companies. My net worth is well into the billions. And here I was, being threatened about my career by an intern. If this ever got out, my friends in the business world would laugh about it for years. But Vanessa's attitude wasn't what concerned me. It was her cousin. An HR director shouldn't have that kind of authority, which meant one thing. The problem inside this company had already spread much deeper than it should have. I opened my phone and sent a message to the vice president. "Send out a notice. Company-wide meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. All employees must attend. No exceptions." The message had barely gone through when I got a reply. "Understood, Mr. Carter." The next morning, I drove to the office like usual. The moment I stepped out of my car, I saw Vanessa standing at the entrance, arms crossed, waiting. Next to her stood a man in his early 30s, dressed in a tailored suit. He carried himself with the kind of confidence that only comes from having unchecked authority. I glanced at his name badge, Daniel Brooks, HR Director. The moment Vanessa saw me, she stepped forward quickly and blocked my path. Then she turned to him. "It's him, Daniel. That's the one." Daniel looked me up and down slowly, like he already knew how this would go. "So you're the factory worker who disrespected my cousin?" he said. "Who hired you in the first place? I don't remember seeing your face." To avoid unnecessary attention, I always kept a low profile when I was at this branch. Simple clothes, no entourage, and the cheapest car in my garage. Only a few top executives knew who I really was, and someone like him was nowhere near that level. When Daniel said he didn't recognize me, Vanessa's eyes lit up. "See?" she said immediately. "Even you don't know him. That means he got in through connections. Fire him, right now." Daniel laughed, a cold, dismissive laugh. "So it's a backdoor hire. That explains the attitude." He lifted his chin slightly, clearly enjoying himself. "I'll tell you what," he said. "Out of kindness, since you've been driving my cousin to and from work for a month, I'll let you keep your job." He paused. "But you'll have to agree to a few conditions." I stood there listening. "First," he said, counting on his fingers, "a placement fee, $50,000, transferred directly to my personal account. Otherwise, one word from me and you're out." He raised another finger. "Second, from now on, you'll drive my cousin to and from work every day. You'll do whatever she says whenever she says it. No questions." Another finger. "Third, last night you ignored her request to pick us up. That needs compensation." He spoke like he had done this many times before. "Taxi fee, $1,000. Drinks and karaoke, $4,000. And since my cousin couldn't sleep all night because she was so upset, That's another 10,000 for emotional distress. He finished counting. That makes 65,000. Then he looked straight at me. Cash or transfer? I stood there, taking it all in. Never in my life. Had I imagined that as the owner of this company, I would have my own employees standing at the front entrance, in broad daylight, demanding money from me without a single hint of hesitation. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed me his payment code, waiting. Like this was already decided. Vanessa stood next to him, watching with satisfaction, enjoying every second. Around us, employees had started to gather. No one looked surprised. Some glanced at me with sympathy, like they were telling me to just pay and avoid trouble. Others smirked slightly, like I had picked the wrong people to cross. Looking at their reactions, I turned back to Daniel. So everyone who wants to work here has to pay you 50,000? I asked. He gave a cold laugh. That depends on the situation, he said. Someone like you who skipped the normal hiring process, me as HR director, fixing your paperwork, don't you think that deserves some compensation? Vanessa nodded eagerly. Exactly, she added. The fact that my cousin is even willing to take your money means he thinks you're worth the effort. She smiled. Just like when I rode in your car. That was a privilege for you. I paused for a second, then asked calmly, what if I refuse? Daniel didn't hesitate. He slipped his phone back into his pocket slowly, like someone who already believed the outcome was guaranteed. If you refuse, he said calmly, I make one call right now. In 15 minutes, you'll have your termination letter, your things packed in a box, and security escorting you out of the building. He paused, just enough to let it sink in. And as a bonus, he added, I'll personally make sure no company in this industry hires you again. Vanessa crossed her arms, smiling with quiet satisfaction. We told you last night, she said, but you hung up, twice. She tilted her head slightly. Now the price has gone up. That's how this works. The employees around us formed a loose circle. No one stepped in. Some looked down. Others watched me with that same expression, the kind that comes from having seen this before, and learning not to get involved. It was a silent understanding. This is how things are here. And if you don't accept it, you pay the price. I put my hands in my pockets and looked at both of them for a few seconds. Then I said, Interesting. Daniel frowned slightly. Interesting? Yes, I replied calmly. I've been wondering for weeks why this branch has the worst performance out of all my companies. I paused. Low numbers, high turnover, good employees disappearing without explanation. Another pause. Now I understand. Daniel let out a short laugh. Look at this guy, he said, turning slightly toward the others. He's giving speeches before getting fired. A few nervous laughs came from the crowd. Vanessa joined in, clearly enjoying it. 30 seconds, Daniel said, turning back to me, his tone turning cold again. Either you take out your phone and transfer the money, he paused, or I call security. You decide. I looked at him, then at Vanessa, then at the employees standing around us. Some had their shoulders lowered. Others had that distant look, like they had gotten used to this kind of thing a long time ago. All right, I said. Daniel smiled. Vanessa's eyes lit up. All right, I repeated. But first, I need to make a call. Daniel rolled his eyes. You're not calling anyone who can help you, he said. I already told you my connections in this industry are. I'm not calling anyone in the industry, I interrupted calmly. I'm calling Vice President Gallagher. I paused. I want to confirm the time for the 9 a.m. meeting. Silence. Daniel blinked. What meeting? The company-wide meeting, I said. All employees. No exceptions. I took out my phone. I scheduled it last night. Didn't you get the notice? I saw the exact moment something shifted in his expression. Not fear yet, but a crack. A small one. I didn't receive anything, he said. His tone wasn't as confident as before. That's strange, I replied, glancing at my phone, because Gallagher sent it out hours ago. Right on cue. Daniel's phone vibrated in his pocket, then again, and again. He hesitated for a second before taking it out. I watched as his eyes moved across the screen, and that small crack turned into something bigger. It's just an internal notice, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Yes, I said. A general meeting. I paused. Hosted by the owner of the company. Another pause. Then I added, that would be me. The silence that followed felt heavy. Vanessa stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Daniel slowly lifted his head from his phone. Around us, the employees had completely stopped talking. That's Vanessa started, then stopped. A joke? I finished for her. Her voice didn't sound as sharp anymore. Desmond, I said without turning. From inside the building, the vice president stepped out, accompanied by 2 assistants. He walked straight toward me, calm, professional. Like nothing about this situation surprised him. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," he said. "The 9 a.m. meeting is ready. Main conference room, full capacity." Daniel didn't say a word. Vanessa didn't either. Desmond gave them both a quick glance, then looked back at me. "Would you like to begin on time?" "On time," I replied. Then I walked past them, straight toward the entrance. Behind me, I could hear Vanessa whispering something to Daniel. Her voice had changed. It wasn't confident anymore. It sounded urgent, almost panicked. I didn't turn around. There was a meeting to run, and it was time for this company to remember who was actually in charge. The main conference room took up the entire northeast corner of the 4th floor. Glass walls. You could see everything from the outside. That wasn't by accident. When I had it built 3 years ago, the architect asked if I wanted privacy. I said no. I wanted people to see what happened inside, to know decisions weren't made in the dark. Today, that transparency was going to mean something else. I walked in at 8:57. The room was already full. Department managers, supervisors, office staff, factory technicians. Some were standing because there weren't enough chairs left. Desmond had even set up extra screens outside so people in the hallway could follow the meeting. I took my seat at the head of the table. No stage, no microphone, no presentation, just me. And silence. The moment people realized the meeting was starting, the entire room went still. Daniel walked in 2 minutes later. Vanessa right behind him. They looked around for seats. There were none, so they stayed at the back, standing against the wall. Vanessa kept her eyes down. Daniel tried to look composed, but it was forced. You could see it. "Good morning," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "I'll keep this brief. I value everyone's time." I paused. I've spent the last few weeks visiting this branch quietly, observing operations, walking the factory floor, talking to people at different levels. Another pause. And I found what I was looking for. No one moved. "This branch has capable people," I continued. "Experienced people, committed people, but it also has one of the highest turnover rates in my entire group." I let that settle. When that happens, there's usually a reason that doesn't show up in reports. Desmond stepped forward and placed a thin folder in front of me. I opened it slowly. "This morning," I said, before entering the building. I paused. I personally witnessed a situation where an employee was asked to pay money in order to keep their job. A murmur spread through the room. Short, heavy. At the back, Daniel's posture tightened. "I'm not calling it anything beyond what I saw," I continued calmly. "But starting today, there will be a full internal review of the HR department." I closed the folder. "That review will cover all hiring decisions, transfers, and role changes from the past 18 months. Silence again. "That's all for now," I said. "Thank you." The meeting lasted 4 minutes. Daniel caught up to me in the hallway before I reached the elevator. He grabbed my arm. Not aggressively, but urgently. "Wait," he said, lowering his voice. "Listen, what happened this morning was a misunderstanding." He spoke quickly. "My cousin is young. She says things without thinking. I was just, how many employees have you transferred without proper approval in the past year?" I cut him off. He froze, just for a second. He started. "I already have names," I said. That wasn't entirely true yet, but it didn't matter. "A review is happening either way," I continued. "The only question is whether you face it on your own terms or not." Daniel said nothing. His face had changed. Completely. I let go of his arm, turned, and stepped into the elevator. The person who helped me the most that day was someone I barely knew before. Florence Kwan, operations manager. She had been with the company for 11 years. Quiet, consistent, the kind of person no one notices until something goes wrong. She had a habit, documenting everything, not just in the official system, but in her own private records, just in case. I had seen her name once in a report months ago. Strong performance. 3 promotion requests denied. No clear reason. That stayed in the back of my mind. That morning, before the meeting, I asked Desmond to bring her to me. We met in a small room on the 3rd floor. 8:40 a.m. She walked in on time, holding a tablet. Calm, controlled. "I know who you are," she said as soon as the door closed. No hesitation. Good, I replied. That saves time. She placed the tablet on the table and turned it toward me. I know what you've been looking for, she said. Then she added, I've been tracking it for 14 months. I looked at the screen. Hiring irregularities, she continued. Employees on payroll that no one has actually seen. Transfers that don't match operational needs. Decisions that don't make sense. She paused. I didn't report it earlier, she said, because the last 2 people I tried to tell stopped responding within 3 days. I looked at her. Names? I asked. They're all in there, she said. Dates, estimated amounts, and where the money went, when I could trace it. It was more than I expected. Why wait 14 months? I asked. She didn't hesitate. Because without someone who could actually act on it, this would have cost me my job. She met my eyes. I was waiting for the right moment. I nodded slowly. That kind of patience, that kind of control, that was rare. Send everything to Desmond, I said, and be ready. This is going to move fast. That afternoon, while the review team started working quietly 2 floors below, I sat in the temporary office they had set up for me and started going through Florence's files. It didn't take long to see the pattern. It was clean. Almost too clean. Hires going through without proper checks. Payments processed automatically. Some employees were real, but overpaid. Others didn't exist at all. And under all of it, there was one name. Again and again and again, a second approval. Always the same, a digital signature, small, easy to overlook, but consistent. Someone else was involved, someone above Daniel. I leaned back slightly. This wasn't just a problem. It was a system, and I had only just started to see how deep it went. I closed the file and stared at the screen for a moment. There was something that didn't sit right. Not obvious, not loud, but there, like a small detail that refuses to go away once you notice it. The secondary approvals. I counted them. 23 documents, 14 months, all with the same digital signature. According to the company structure, that position belonged to the Assistant Director of Administration. I searched the internal directory. Marcus Hale. He had been in the role for 4 years. Before that, he had rotated through different departments across multiple branches. Nothing impressive, nothing alarming, just average. The kind of person no one really pays attention to. I requested his full file. And that night, back at the hotel, I went through it. On the surface, nothing stood out, but buried inside his past transfers, there was something. At one of the branches he had worked at years ago, the HR director had been dismissed for irregular hiring practices. Marcus Hale had been questioned during that internal review. The report said there was no evidence of his involvement. What the report didn't say, because no one had looked for it, was that the HR director who got fired back then was Daniel Brooks's uncle. I closed the file. There it was. This wasn't something new. It had been building for years, moving quietly from one branch to another, setting itself up, waiting, and they had chosen well. This was the smallest branch in my portfolio, the one farthest from my direct attention. They assumed I wouldn't look closely enough. They almost got it right. That same night, I made a call. Marcus Steele, head of corporate security. He had worked with me for over a decade. Didn't talk much, didn't ask unnecessary questions, and never failed to find what I needed. I need you to track a license plate, I said. Then I gave him my own. There was a short pause. Timeline? He asked. By tomorrow morning. Understood. I hung up, then went back to Florence's files. There was still something bothering me, something small, but persistent. Then it clicked. The first time Vanessa got into my car, she had wrinkled her nose, stepped away, then, just before pulling out her phone, she glanced at the dashboard. Just for a second. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now, it looked different. She wasn't distracted. She was checking something, the license plate, and then she typed, which meant one thing, from the very beginning. Someone had already been watching me, and that someone wasn't Daniel. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:14 a.m. Marcus Steele. The plate was accessed 38 days ago, he said, from a third-party system connected to fleet management. I stayed silent. The account used belongs to Marcus Hale, he continued, Assistant Director of Administration. I exhaled slowly. Reason? I asked. Logged as a routine parking verification. A brief pause. But it doesn't add up. Why not? That vehicle isn't registered in the branch system, he said. There's no operational reason for him to check it. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Got it, I said. I ended the call and sat there on the edge of the bed for a few seconds. Marcus Hale had checked my plate weeks before Vanessa ever got into my car, which meant they knew who I was, long before I knew anything about them. They had done their homework, identified the car, then sent Vanessa. She wasn't just an arrogant intern, she was bait. The plan was simple and smart. If they could create a situation where I looked compromised, if they could get something that suggested an inappropriate connection, they would have leverage. Not to attack me directly, that would be too obvious, but to protect themselves, because the moment any investigation started, they could shift the focus, create a problem big enough to make everything else disappear. But they miscalculated. Two things. First, I never gave Vanessa anything that could be used against me. Second, Florence Kwan had been documenting everything for 14 months. At 9 a.m., I walked into the office and went straight to Marcus Hale's office. He was at his desk when I entered. He looked up, expecting someone else. It took him 2 seconds to adjust. "Mr. Carter," he said, standing up. "Sit," I said. And I sat down first. He followed. I watched him carefully. Mid-40s, composed, hands resting calmly on the desk. The kind of person who survives by staying unnoticed. "I assume you know why I'm here," I said, a small pause. "Because of the review," he replied. "In part." I placed a single sheet of paper on his desk, the record of the license plate access. He looked at it, no dramatic reaction, just a slight shift in his eyes. "It was a routine check," he said. "With a plate that doesn't exist in your system?" I asked. I leaned back slightly. "Who told you to look it up?" Silence. "Marcus," I said, using his name. "We already have Florence Kwan's file." I paused. 23 documents with your approval. Your history from the previous branch." Then I tapped the paper. "And this," I held his gaze. "What I don't have yet is your version." He stared at the paper for a few seconds, then looked away, then back at me. "Daniel told me you were a factory technician," he said finally. His voice had changed, less steady. "He said you lived in Lakeview," he continued, "that you worked side jobs on weekends, that Vanessa confirmed it herself." I didn't interrupt. "I checked the plate to verify," he said. "The car was registered under a holding company I didn't recognize." A pause. When I told Daniel that, he said it was probably borrowed. Silence filled the room. "I didn't design this," Marcus added. "Daniel came in 2 years ago. The system was already running." He swallowed. "He brought me in because he needed a second approval." Another pause. "At first it seemed small," he said. Then he stopped. Then it was too late. I watched him. "How many people are involved?" I asked. He pressed his lips together, then answered. 4 more, he said, "all in administrative roles. 3 are his relatives." He hesitated. "The 4th is his girlfriend, hired 8 months ago. He created the position for her." I nodded slowly. "Do you have records?" I asked. A long pause. "Yes, send everything today," I said. "Desmond will give you the address." I stood up, then looked at him one last time. "Cooperating won't erase what you did," I said, "but it will matter." I turned and walked out. Through the glass walls, I could see Daniel inside a meeting room, 2 auditors sitting across from him. His posture had changed. He wasn't in control anymore, and for the first time, it showed. The audit meeting with Daniel lasted a little over 3 hours. I know that because I spent that entire time upstairs with Florence and 2 external auditors, going through everything she had collected over the past 14 months, piece by piece, document by document. She had built it quietly, carefully, without rushing. By the time Desmond showed up at the door at 1:47 p.m. and gave me a small nod, I already knew how this would end. I went down to the 3rd floor. The meeting room doors were still open. Daniel was sitting in the same chair, but something about him had changed. Earlier, he looked like someone still trying to stay in control. Now, he looked like someone who had already lost it. I walked in. The auditors stepped aside. Daniel looked up at me. For the first time since the morning, we were face to face again. And the difference from earlier, from the entrance, from the payment demands, from the confidence, was impossible to ignore. "Do you know how many employees this branch has lost in the past 18 months? I asked. He didn't answer. 43, I said. 43 people with strong records, good performance, years of experience, who either asked to leave or were pushed out. I placed a document on the table. Some transferred, some resigned. I paused. Several of them said the same thing on their way out. I looked at him. They felt like their work didn't matter. They felt like decisions didn't make sense. Silence. I tapped the paper lightly. I'm not showing you this to make a point, I said. I'm showing you this because every one of those names has a cost. Hiring. Training. Lost time. I paused again, but more than that. I looked at him steadily. That's 43 people who walked away feeling like they didn't matter. Daniel clenched his jaw. But he didn't speak. Do you have anything to say? I asked. A pause. I already told the auditors everything, he said quietly. I know. I leaned forward slightly. I also spoke with Marcus Hale this morning. That got a reaction. Small, but there. We have what we need, I continued. This isn't an interrogation anymore. I paused. This is a courtesy. He frowned slightly. What kind of courtesy? The kind where I tell you what happens next, before you read it in writing. I folded my hands. You're being terminated, effective immediately. The case is being forwarded for further action, depending on what the auditors confirm. The relatives you hired without proper process will be removed this week. The accounts tied to irregular payments have already been frozen. Daniel opened his mouth. And one more thing, I added before he could speak. The employee from marketing who was moved to the warehouse last month, I paused. He's being reinstated, full back pay, and additional compensation. I closed the folder. That's all. Daniel didn't argue, didn't react. He just sat there, like someone who had finally run out of moves. I walked out. Vanessa was sitting in the hallway, waiting. She stood up as soon as she saw me. Mr. Carter, she started. Cole, I corrected calmly. Her last name, not mine. You can use the room next door, I said. Someone will meet you shortly to handle your termination. Her expression shifted. I didn't know you were, she started. I know, I interrupted. Then I looked at her for a moment. But you did know what you were doing was wrong. Silence. The mistake, I continued, was thinking that the consequences only apply to people who can't push back. Her eyes started to water. Not dramatically, just reality setting in. Learn something from this, I said. That was all. I walked away. Later that afternoon, I asked Florence to meet me again. Same room, 3rd floor. She arrived with the same calm expression, same tablet, but something had changed. The tension she carried before was gone. I placed a document in front of her. This is a formal offer, I said. She looked down. Regional Operations Director. It includes this branch and 2 others. She read it carefully. Every line. No rush. Then she looked up. Why regional? She asked. Because what you did here, I said. Over 14 months, alone, without support. I paused. That's exactly what I need at a larger scale. I held her gaze. The difference now is, you won't be doing it alone. A brief silence. Then she picked up the pen and signed. No celebration. She didn't need one. That evening, before heading back to the hotel, I stayed in the parking lot for a few minutes. I looked at my car. The cheapest one I owned. The one Marcus had traced. The one Vanessa had noticed on the very first day. That quick glance she gave the dashboard. That I had dismissed at the time. Now I understood. Arrogance isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It decides, without thinking, who matters and who doesn't. Daniel never really looked into who I was, because he had already decided. Work clothes, simple car, no presents. Conclusion, no threat. Vanessa did the same thing. She trusted borrowed power, because as long as no one challenges it, it feels real. That's the problem with power that isn't earned. It becomes routine, comfortable, and after a while, people stop questioning it. This branch had lived like that for almost 2 years. 43 people left. Others stayed quiet. And one person, Florence, spent 14 months building the truth. Not loudly, not urgently, just patiently. I got in the car, started the engine, and thought about one thing. The most expensive lesson someone like Daniel can learn is this. The person you underestimate doesn't always walk away. Sometimes they just wait. And while you're busy feeling untouchable, they're building the case that ends everything. No noise, no rush, just time and proof.